Tonight we're going to talk about intelligence, not the kind you measure with a test or a grade, the kind that shows up in how people survive, how they manipulate, how they build, how they sacrifice, and how they outwit forces that should be impossible to beat. Gravity Falls is a show about a small town full of mysteries. But underneath all the cryptograms and hidden messages and supernatural creatures, it's also a show about different kinds of smart, about a scientist who could understand the fabric of reality but couldn't see through a triangle's flattery, about a con man who couldn't pass a high school exam but taught himself interdimensional engineering out of love for his brother, about a 12-year-old boy whose mind never stopped asking questions, about a demon who'd been alive for 1 trillion years and still couldn't figure out the one thing that mattered most. Each character in Gravity Falls demonstrates that intelligence isn't one thing. It's many things, and the smartest person in the room depends entirely on what room you're standing in. If you're here to fall asleep, settle in. This one's going to take a while. If you're here to actually think about it, even better. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve these videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. Cipher is the most intelligent character in Gravity Falls, and it's not close. He's an interdimensional dream demon who has existed for over 1 trillion years, who destroyed his own dimension and conquered the nightmare realm, and who spent centuries manipulating some of the brightest minds in human history. Bill's intelligence operates on a level that most characters in the show can't even perceive, let alone comprehend. And yet the show uses Bill to demonstrate something profound about what intelligence means when it's disconnected from everything that gives life meaning. Bill was born in a place called Euclidia, the second dimension. It was a flat world populated by flat beings with flat minds who could only perceive 2 dimensions of reality. Bill was different. He could see something the others couldn't. He could perceive the 3rd dimension, a whole layer of existence that his people didn't even know was there. Imagine being the only person in your entire civilization who could see depth, who understood that reality was bigger and stranger and more complex than anyone around you believed. That's what Bill experienced from the moment he became aware of what made him different. This is where Bill's intelligence first manifests, not as book learning or technical skill, but as perception. Bill could see what others couldn't. And this kind of intelligence, the ability to perceive patterns and dimensions and truths that are invisible to everyone around you, is arguably the most fundamental form of genius there is. Everything else that Bill accomplished in his trillion-year existence grew from this single quality. He saw more than others saw. He understood more than others understood. And that understanding changed him in ways that were both extraordinary and catastrophic. Bill tried to show his people what he could see. He tried to liberate them from their flat existence, to reveal the 3rd dimension to a civilization that had no framework for understanding it. And in doing so, he destroyed his entire dimension. He burned Euclidia to nothing. Everyone he'd ever known, including his own parents, was consumed by the chaos he unleashed. The show presents this as Bill's original sin, the moment when his intelligence crossed the line from visionary to destructive. Bill saw the truth of reality more clearly than anyone else in his world, and his attempt to share that truth annihilated everything. This is one of the most important things Gravity Falls tells us about intelligence through Bill's character. Being able to see the truth doesn't mean you know how to share it. Being the smartest person in the room doesn't mean you know what to do with that intelligence. Bill had the perception to see beyond his dimension, but he lacked the wisdom to understand that forcing others to see what he saw could destroy them. His intelligence was enormous, and his emotional understanding of how to use that intelligence was virtually non-existent. The destruction of Euclidia also reveals something about Bill that the show explores throughout its run. Bill suffers from what we might recognize as survivor's guilt and post-traumatic stress, even though he'd never admit it. He claims he liberated his people. He says he set them free from their flat existence. But the book of Bill and the show's deeper lore make it clear that Bill is lying to himself. He destroyed his home, his family, and everyone he'd ever known. And rather than confront that reality, he constructed a narrative where he was a hero instead of a monster. This psychological defense mechanism shows intelligence turned inward for self-protection. Bill's mind is so capable that it can construct elaborate self-deceptions and maintain them for 1 trillion years. He's been running from the truth about Euclidia for longer than human civilization has existed, and his intelligence helps him run faster and further than any other being could. After destroying Euclidia, Bill took over the Nightmare Realm, a chaotic intergalactic space between dimensions where the laws of physics don't apply and reality itself is unstable. The Nightmare Realm is a place that exists in the foam between dimensions, a lawless, shifting space that was fated to eventually collapse into itself. Bill didn't just survive in this place, he ruled it. He conquered an environment that has no consistent rules, no stable ground, no predictable physics, and he made it his domain for eons. The fact that Bill could function and thrive in a place where causality itself breaks down shows intelligence that transcends anything we'd normally measure. Most intelligent beings need consistent rules to work with. Scientists need repeatable experiments. Strategists need predictable opponents. Engineers need reliable physics. Bill can operate without any of these things. His mind is flexible enough to function in environments where the fundamental nature of reality changes from moment to moment. In the Nightmare Realm, Bill gathered followers. His henchmaniacs, a collection of interdimensional criminals and monsters, became his inner circle. The fact that Bill could organize and lead a group of chaotic beings in a lawless dimension shows organizational intelligence and leadership ability. Bill doesn't just operate alone. He can inspire loyalty, coordinate group efforts, and maintain authority over beings who by nature resist authority. He does this primarily through force of personality and the demonstration of power. But maintaining leadership over cosmic beings for eons requires more than just being scary. It requires understanding what your followers want, giving them enough to keep them loyal, and managing their conflicts and ambitions without losing control of the group. Bill's intelligence also manifests through his mastery of manipulation across human history. Bill made contact with humans on Earth multiple times over the centuries, always working toward his ultimate goal of gaining a physical form and merging the Nightmare Realm with the third dimension. He manipulated great minds, approaching them in dreams, offering knowledge, making deals that seemed generous but always served Bill's interests. The natives of Gravity Falls encountered him centuries before Ford Pines ever arrived. They were so horrified by what they learned about Bill that they created an elaborate zodiac prophecy, detailed cave paintings warning future generations, and then evacuated the entire valley, declaring it cursed land. A local shaman named Modoc the Wise was asked by Bill to build an interdimensional gateway. When Modoc learned of the prophecy that foretold the apocalyptic consequences of working with Bill, he set himself on fire, rather than risk Bill's influence spreading further. Think about what that means for a moment. A wise man, someone respected by his entire community for his knowledge and judgment, concluded that the only safe response to Bill's intelligence was to remove himself from existence entirely. Modoc understood that Bill's manipulative capability was so powerful that simply knowing about Bill was dangerous. As long as Modoc was alive, there was a chance Bill could find a way to use him. Modoc's suicide is the most extreme testament to Bill's intelligence in the entire series because it shows that someone of genuine wisdom believed that death was preferable to the risk of being in Bill's orbit. This is what makes Bill's manipulative intelligence so dangerous. He doesn't just trick people. He understands them so deeply that he can make them destroy themselves or each other while thinking they're making their own choices. Bill reads people like open books, identifies their deepest desires and insecurities, and then constructs scenarios where serving Bill's goals feels like pursuing their own dreams. He doesn't need threats or coercion. He needs your weakness, your vanity, your fear, your loneliness. Give Bill any one of those things, and he can turn you into his instrument. The clearest and most devastating example of this manipulative intelligence is Bill's relationship with Stanford Pines. Ford is one of the most brilliant humans to ever live. He has an abnormally high IQ, 6 fingers on each hand from a rare birth defect, and a mind capable of understanding dimensional physics, alien technology, and the fundamental nature of Gravity Falls' supernatural anomalies. Ford completed his doctoral program 3 years ahead of schedule. He produced a nationally ranked thesis. He single-handedly documented the supernatural phenomena of an entire region. Ford is not someone who gets tricked easily. He's suspicious, analytical, and deeply invested in understanding how things work. And Bill tricked him completely. Bill approached Ford by claiming to be a muse. Not just any muse, but one who selected a single great intellect to inspire once every century. This is where Bill's psychological intelligence becomes apparent. Bill didn't appeal to Ford's greed or his fear. He appealed to Ford's ego. Ford was a genius who'd spent his life being different because of his 6 fingers, who'd been ostracized and misunderstood, whose own father only valued him for the money his intellect might generate. Bill understood that Ford's deepest need wasn't for money or power. It was for recognition. Ford wanted someone to see his brilliance and celebrate it. He wanted to be told that his 6-fingered hands weren't a deformity, but a mark of distinction. He wanted confirmation that he was special. Bill positioned himself as exactly that kind of validation, a cosmic entity who recognized Ford as extraordinary among all the minds in human history. Ford fell for it completely. He developed what the show describes as an obsession with Bill, collecting triangular memorabilia, redesigning his home's architecture to reflect Bill's image, and even converting his private study into a place of worship. Ford's brilliant analytical mind, which could detect patterns in supernatural phenomena and decode alien languages, couldn't detect the con being run on him because the con was operating on emotional frequencies that Ford's intellectual training hadn't prepared him to analyze. Bill wasn't presenting false data or flawed science. He was presenting emotional validation that Ford desperately needed, and Ford had no defense against it because he'd never developed the emotional intelligence to recognize when his need for approval was being weaponized. Under Bill's guidance, Ford was introduced to vast knowledge about the dimensional rift beneath Gravity Falls. Bill revealed that the weirdness of the town was caused by a gap between dimensions, and he helped Ford design an interdimensional gateway that could bridge the nightmare realm and physical reality. Ford thought he was building a scientific instrument that would benefit humanity. He was actually building a doorway for Bill to enter the physical world and unleash interdimensional chaos. Ford recruited his college friend Fiddleford McGucket to help with construction, and together they built a machine capable of creating a stable gateway between dimensions. The entire time, Ford believed he was collaborating with a muse on humanity's greatest scientific achievement. He was actually serving as a construction foreman for an interdimensional invasion. The depth of Bill's manipulation of Ford shows intelligence about psychology, patience, and long-term planning that goes beyond anything a normal being could achieve. Bill maintained this deception for months, possibly years. He studied Ford's personality, learned his triggers, anticipated his doubts, and crafted responses that would keep Ford believing in the partnership. When Ford started to have concerns about the portal, Bill knew exactly what to say to keep him working. When Fiddleford saw a glimpse of the truth through the portal and begged Ford to stop, Bill had already built enough trust with Ford that Ford chose to continue. When suspicion finally began to crack Ford's devotion, it was already too late. The portal was built. The damage was done. Bill's powers further demonstrate the scope of his intelligence. In the mindscape, Bill can reshape reality at will, entering people's dreams, extracting information from their minds, and manipulating their perceptions in ways that blur the line between reality and illusion. He possesses what the show describes as near omniscience, vast knowledge accumulated over 1 trillion years of consciousness. He understands dimensional physics well enough to have destroyed his own dimension and survived the aftermath. He can manipulate time, warp space, control matter and energy, and process information from multiple dimensions simultaneously. His eye, singular and all-seeing, represents his fundamental nature as an observer and perceiver, someone whose primary intelligence is in seeing things others cannot. Bill also demonstrates intelligence through his understanding of deals and contracts. As a dream demon, Bill operates through deals, shaking hands with people and granting wishes or services in exchange for access to their minds or bodies. Bill can only enter someone's mind if they agree to let him in, which means every deal requires genuine consent. Bill's intelligence shows in how he structures these deals. He's technically honest about what the deal entails, but he words agreements in ways that hide their true implications. He's a cosmic lawyer, exploiting loopholes and ambiguities in his own contracts while maintaining technical honesty. This requires linguistic intelligence, understanding of how language creates binding agreements, and the ability to predict how people will interpret his words versus what those words actually mean. The deal he makes with Dipper in the episode Dreamscaperers shows this contract intelligence in action. Bill agrees to help Gideon break into Stan's mind to find the combination to a safe. Bill fulfills the deal by entering Stan's mind, but he also pursues his own agenda while inside. Bill uses the letter of the agreement to justify actions that go far beyond what Gideon intended. This shows Bill's ability to find productive ambiguity in language and exploit it for his own purposes, a form of intelligence that lawyers, politicians, and diplomats develop over entire careers. Bill has refined it over 1 trillion years. During Weirdmageddon, when Bill finally achieves a physical form, his powers expand to near omnipotent levels within the boundaries of Gravity Falls. He rearranges Preston Northwest's face by shuffling the function of every hole in it, a casual act of biological manipulation that shows understanding of anatomy and the willingness to use it for petty entertainment. He turns Ford into a golden statue because Ford refuses to help him. He destroys the 3 journals, eliminating decades of Ford's research in seconds. He creates an army of interdimensional nightmares, transforms Gravity Falls into a landscape of pure chaos, and kills Time Baby, a being powerful enough to control time itself, with a single blast. He changes the show's own opening credits, replacing created by Alex Hirsch with created by Bill Cipher, in an act of fourth wall awareness that suggests Bill's intelligence perceives even the metafictional structure of his own existence. The scope of Bill's abilities during Weirdmageddon demonstrates intelligence and power operating at cosmic scales. Bill can warp reality at will, create life, destroy life, manipulate matter and energy, and control space and time within his domain. He organizes elaborate entertainment for himself and his henchmaniacs, including what he calls his never-ending party. He builds a massive pyramid fortress that serves as his base of operations. He creates bubble prisons that trap people in personalized fantasy worlds. Each of these achievements requires not just power but intelligence about how to use that power effectively and how to maintain control over a chaotic situation involving multiple dimensions and countless beings. But Bill can't leave Gravity Falls. Despite all his intelligence and all his power, he's trapped within the weirdness barrier that surrounds the town. Ford created an equation that generates this barrier, and Bill cannot solve it or find a way around it. This limitation is crucial because it shows that even trillion-year intelligence has gaps. Bill's intelligence is vast but not infinite. He can warp reality, manipulate minds, and control time, but he can't crack a mathematical equation designed by a human being. The barrier exists because Ford's intelligence, in at least one specific domain, produced something that Bill's intelligence cannot overcome. This suggests that intelligence isn't purely about volume or duration. Specific expertise in specific domains can create solutions that even vastly greater general intelligence cannot replicate. And yet, despite all of this intelligence, all of this power, all of this accumulated knowledge from 1 trillion years of existence, Bill loses. He loses because of something his intelligence could never account for, which is the willingness of one old man to sacrifice everything for the people he loves. Stan Pines offers to let Bill into his mind, pretending to be Ford. Bill enters Stan's mind, and Ford fires the memory gun. Bill is destroyed along with Stan's memories. The moment of Bill's defeat is one of the most important scenes in the show because it reveals the fundamental limitation of Bill's intelligence. Bill is trapped in Stan's mind as the memories are being erased. He's surrounded by disappearing fragments of Stan's life, the mystery shack falling apart, photographs fading, memories dissolving. Bill approaches Stan and offers him anything. Literally anything. His own galaxy, unlimited power, whatever Stan wants. Bill's intelligence tells him that everything has a price and everyone can be negotiated with, because in 1 trillion years of deal-making, Bill has never encountered someone who couldn't be bought or manipulated. Stan's response is to punch Bill in the eye and say that he's finally found something he's good for. This is what Gravity Falls says about intelligence through Bill's Cipher. Bill was the smartest being in the show by virtually every measurable standard. He understood physics and dimensions and psychology and manipulation at levels no one else could match. And he still lost because he couldn't understand love. He couldn't understand why Stan would choose to erase himself for his family. He couldn't understand why the Pines family would fight so hard for each other despite their differences and their pain. Bill's intelligence was vast enough to see across dimensions and manipulate reality itself, and it wasn't broad enough to comprehend the simplest thing that humans do, which is care about someone more than they care about themselves. Bill's last words, reversed and decoded, spell out a message to the axolotl, a cosmic entity capable of granting him another chance at existence. Even in the moment of his destruction, Bill's intelligence is working, calculating, planning contingencies beyond death itself. The message reads AXOLOTL. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. His mind never stops scheming, never stops looking for angles, never stops searching for escape routes. This is both his greatest strength and his fundamental limitation. Bill thinks so constantly and so strategically that he can never simply exist. He can never be present. He can never connect. His intelligence isolates him as completely and as tragically as any character in animation. The Book of Bill reveals that when Bill does meet the axolotl after his destruction, he fakes remorse and agrees to a deal before hearing the full terms, thinking he's outsmarted yet another cosmic being. This is Bill's pattern. His intelligence is always looking for the next angle, the next exploitation, the next shortcut. And this pattern, this inability to genuinely learn or change or grow, is what the axolotl is counting on. Bill's trial isn't about punishment, it's about growth. And Bill's intelligence, vast as it is, has never once been directed toward growing as a person. It's only ever been directed toward gaining more power, more control, more escape from the guilt he's been running from since Euclidia burned. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. A trillion-year-old demon shows us intelligence at its most cosmic and its most disconnected. But one human scientist demonstrates what happens when that kind of genius encounters the supernatural and what it costs to be the smartest person in a room you were never supposed to enter. Stanford Pines is the most academically intelligent human character in Gravity Falls, and arguably one of the most gifted scientific minds in his entire universe. Ford was born with an abnormally high IQ and 6 fingers on each hand, a rare birth defect that made him feel like an outsider from childhood, but also marked him as fundamentally different from everyone around him. Ford's story is about what happens when a brilliant mind encounters forces beyond its comprehension, and how the very qualities that make someone a genius can become the vulnerabilities that bring them down. Ford grew up in Glass Shard Beach, New Jersey, alongside his twin brother, Stanley. From childhood, Ford showed intellectual capability far beyond his peers. He won science fairs, devoured books on the supernatural and science fiction, and developed theories that most adults couldn't follow. His intelligence was genuine and deep, but it came with a social cost. Ford's 6 fingers made him a target for bullying, and his intellectual abilities created distance between him and most people his age. The only person who truly understood and accepted Ford was his brother Stan, who was Ford's opposite in many ways. Less academically gifted, but more socially skilled, more street smart, more comfortable navigating the world through charm rather than analysis. Their father, Fiddleford Pines, saw Ford's intellect as a resource. When Ford's perpetual motion machine caught the attention of a prestigious university, Philbrick saw dollar signs and prestige. Ford became the golden child, the one who was going to make the family rich and respected. Stan became the screw-up, the one who couldn't keep up, the one who was tolerated because he came as a package deal with his genius brother. This family dynamic planted seeds that would shape both brothers' entire lives and their relationship with intelligence itself. This early dynamic is important because it establishes something about Ford's intelligence that becomes a central theme of the show. Ford's genius was always accompanied by isolation. The smarter he got, the fewer people could relate to him. The more he accomplished academically, the further he drifted from normal human connection. His 6 fingers, which should have been medically insignificant, became a symbol of his separateness. Ford learned early that being different meant being alone, and his intelligence made him the most different person in every room he entered. By the time Ford arrived in Gravity Falls as a young researcher, he was brilliant and fundamentally alone, which made him the perfect target for a being who specialized in exploiting lonely geniuses. After the accident where Stan damaged Ford's perpetual motion machine and Ford lost his chance at West Coast Tech, Ford ended up at Backup-Smore University, a low-ranking institution whose most notable achievement was clean dormitories. Most people would have seen this as a devastating setback. Ford's response demonstrates his intellectual character. He threw himself into his work with a ferocity that transformed a terrible situation into a launching pad. He completed his doctoral program 3 years ahead of schedule. He produced a nationally ranked thesis. He proved a theory that the universe might be a hologram with the help of his college roommate, Fiddleford McGucket. He was awarded an enormous grant of $100,000, which in the era when Ford was studying was a massive sum of money for academic research. Ford chose to use his grant to study the supernatural anomalies of Gravity Falls, Oregon. He'd read about the concentration of strange phenomena in the area and recognized it as a once-in-a-lifetime research opportunity. This choice shows both Ford's intelligence and his fundamental character. He wasn't interested in conventional scientific prestige. He didn't want to join a major research university and publish papers that would earn him tenure and comfort. He wanted to understand the unexplainable. He wanted to study things that other scientists wouldn't take seriously, things they dismiss as folklore or superstition. Ford had the intellectual courage to pursue knowledge that the scientific establishment would ridicule, and he was willing to risk his career and reputation to do it. Ford spent years in Gravity Falls, cataloging every anomaly he could find. He filled 3 journals with meticulous research on supernatural creatures, dimensional physics, alien technology, and the fundamental nature of the town's weirdness. He discovered a crashed UFO beneath the town, studied its technology, and learned to read the alien language inscribed on its surfaces. He encountered and documented creatures that range from the relatively harmless, like gnomes and leprechauns, to the genuinely dangerous, like the shapeshifter and the gremloblin. He developed theories about why Gravity Falls attracted so much supernatural activity and worked toward what he called a grand unified theory of weirdness. The journals themselves demonstrate Ford's intelligence in extraordinary detail. Each one is filled with observations, scientific analyses, detailed diagrams, coded messages, and theoretical frameworks. Ford didn't just document what he found. He analyzed it, theorized about it, tested his theories, and revised them when new evidence contradicted his assumptions. The coded messages throughout the journals show Ford's interest in cryptography and information security. He encoded his most sensitive findings in multiple Cipher systems, some of which are sophisticated enough that they took Dipper weeks or months to decode. This shows a mind that operates on multiple levels simultaneously, conducting scientific research while also thinking about information security and the possibility that his work might need to be protected from dangerous entities. Ford's greatest intellectual achievement was also his greatest mistake. After hitting a roadblock in his research, unable to explain the fundamental cause of Gravity Falls' weirdness, Ford discovered a cave filled with cryptic hieroglyphics. The inscription spoke of an all-knowing entity who could provide answers. Despite warnings carved into the same cave walls, Ford read the incantation aloud and summoned Bill Cipher into his mindscape. This moment demonstrates both Ford's intellectual courage and his intellectual arrogance. He was brilliant enough to discover the cave, decode the inscriptions, and perform the summoning ritual. He was also arrogant enough to ignore explicit warnings about the entity he was contacting, because his desire for answers outweighed his respect for danger. Working with Bill as his supposed muse, Ford designed and built an interdimensional portal beneath his home. This device required understanding of physics, engineering, and dimensional science that goes far beyond anything normal human technology could achieve. The portal needed to create a stable gateway between the third dimension and the nightmare realm, which means Ford had to understand how dimensional barriers work, how to generate enough energy to breach those barriers, and how to stabilize the resulting connection so it wouldn't collapse or tear reality apart. He recruited McGucket to help with the practical engineering, and together they built a machine that represents arguably the greatest scientific achievement in the show's universe. The portal also demonstrates Ford's ability to translate theoretical knowledge into practical engineering at scales that would challenge entire research institutions. He didn't just theorize about interdimensional travel. He built a functioning machine in his basement that could achieve it. This requires not only understanding the science, but also solving countless practical engineering problems about power generation, structural integrity, dimensional stability, material science, and safety protocols. Every component had to be designed, tested, and integrated into a system that functioned as a coherent whole. Ford did this with help from McGucket, but without the resources of a major university or research laboratory. He worked out of a cabin in the woods of Oregon, funded his research through his grant money, and built technology that governments and corporations with billion-dollar budgets wouldn't be able to replicate. But the portal also demonstrates Ford's greatest blind spot. Ford was so focused on the intellectual achievement, so consumed by the thrill of discovery and the validation Bill provided, that he couldn't see what his creation was really for. Bill was using Ford's intelligence and ambition to build a doorway for interdimensional invasion. Fiddleford saw a glimpse of the truth when he was briefly pulled through the portal during its first test, witnessing the nightmare realm and Bill's true nature, specifically seeing Bill removing his exoskeleton to feed. Fiddleford came back screaming, begging Ford to shut the project down, predicting apocalyptic consequences if the portal reached full operation. Ford refused because shutting it down would mean abandoning his life's work, admitting he'd been wrong, and confronting the possibility that his greatest achievement was actually a weapon of mass destruction. This moment reveals something crucial about Ford's intelligence. His academic brilliance came packaged with intellectual pride that made him vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation Bill specialized in. Ford needed his intelligence to be validated. He needed to feel that his work mattered, that his discoveries were real, that his genius was being put to meaningful use. He needed someone to tell him that he was special, because his childhood had taught him that being special was the only thing that made him valuable. Bill understood this need and exploited it with surgical precision. Every piece of knowledge Bill shared reinforced Ford's belief that he was chosen, exceptional, one of the great minds of all time. Ford's intelligence was real, but his need for that intelligence to be recognized was his weakness, and Bill played that weakness for years. Ford eventually realized the truth about Bill, but only after McGucket quit and the portal was nearly complete. When Ford discovered Bill's true intentions, that Bill intended to use the portal to bring the nightmare realm into physical reality, Ford shut everything down. He developed a metal plate to protect the inside of his head from Bill's telepathic intrusion. He hid the 3 journals in different locations to ensure that no one could ever reactivate the portal. He abandoned his laboratory beneath the forest and fortified his home against supernatural threats. Ford's response to learning the truth shows the same intelligence that built the portal, now directed toward containment and defense instead of exploration. But a fight with Stan over the journals resulted in the portal accidentally reactivating and pulling Ford into another dimension. This fight happened because Ford invited Stan to Gravity Falls, not to reconcile as brothers, but to take one of the journals and disappear with it, keeping it as far from Gravity Falls as possible. Stan's emotional reaction to being used as a courier rather than welcomed as a brother triggered an argument that escalated into a physical struggle near the active portal. Ford was pulled through and disappeared into the space between dimensions, beginning a 30-year exile that would test every form of intelligence he possessed. Ford spent 3 decades lost in other dimensions. During this time, he survived environments and encounters that would have killed virtually anyone else. He traveled through dimensions filled with hostile creatures, alien civilizations, and realities that operated under completely different physical laws. Some dimensions had higher gravity, some had toxic atmospheres, some had inhabitants who were actively hostile to outsiders. Ford had to learn the rules of each new dimension he entered, identify threats quickly, develop survival strategies with limited resources, and maintain enough psychological stability to keep functioning despite decades of isolation and danger. Ford's survival across dimensions demonstrates intelligence that goes well beyond academic knowledge. It shows adaptability, the ability to learn new rules quickly and apply them in life or death situations. It shows resourcefulness, the ability to use whatever materials and knowledge are available to solve problems that have never been encountered before. It shows physical intelligence, the ability to fight, run, hide, and endure in environments designed to kill him. And it shows psychological resilience, the ability to maintain sanity and purpose across decades of isolation that would have broken most people within months. During his dimensional exile, Ford became an interdimensional outlaw, fighting against threats across multiple realities and building a reputation as someone who opposed tyranny and exploitation wherever he found it. He became proficient with weapons, developed combat skills, and learned to survive in hostile territory without backup or support. Ford transformed from a sheltered academic into a hardened survivor, and this transformation shows a different dimension of his intelligence. Ford could adapt. His mind wasn't locked into one mode of operation. When circumstances demanded that he become a fighter and a survivor rather than a researcher, he made that transition and excelled. When Ford finally returned through the portal, brought back by Stan's 30-year effort to repair it, Ford demonstrated yet another dimension of his intelligence. He immediately assessed the current situation in Gravity Falls, recognized the ongoing threat that Bill posed, and began developing strategies to prevent another dimensional incursion. Ford's approach to this threat shows systematic thinking and the ability to synthesize information from multiple sources into coherent plans. He knew Bill's capabilities from personal experience. He understood the dimensional physics involved from building the portal. He recognized the town's vulnerabilities from his years of research. Ford combined all of this knowledge into a defensive strategy that included sealing the dimensional rift and Bill-proofing his mind and home. Ford's intelligence also shows up in his relationship with Dipper. Ford recognizes in Dipper a kindred spirit, someone whose curiosity and analytical mind mirror Ford's own at a younger age. Ford takes Dipper on adventures, shares his knowledge and experiences, and begins mentoring Dipper in the same scientific curiosity that drove Ford's own career. This mentorship shows that Ford's intelligence includes the ability to recognize and nurture potential in others. Ford sees what Dipper could become and wants to help him get there, which represents growth from the isolated researcher who worked alone and trusted no one. But Ford's mentorship of Dipper also reveals his remaining blind spots. Ford pushes Dipper toward intellectual pursuits and away from his family connections, unconsciously replicating the same pattern that isolated Ford as a young man. Ford offers to make Dipper his apprentice, which would mean separating Dipper from Mabel and the rest of his life. Ford doesn't see the danger in this offer because Ford's own intelligence was developed in isolation, and he unconsciously assumes that isolation is the price of genius. It takes the events of Weirdmageddon for Ford to understand that intelligence developed in connection with others is stronger than intelligence developed alone. The fundamental limitation of Ford's intelligence is his inability to see his own blind spots. Ford is brilliant enough to understand dimensional physics, alien technology, and the supernatural mysteries of Gravity Falls. He can design machines that breach the barriers between realities. He can survive decades in hostile dimensions. He can analyze and document phenomena that defy normal scientific understanding. But he couldn't see through Bill's manipulation. He couldn't recognize that his need for validation was being exploited. He couldn't understand that shutting down the portal was more important than protecting his ego and his life's work. And even after learning the truth about Bill, Ford's pride made it difficult for him to accept help from others, admit that he'd been fooled, or trust anyone enough to work collaboratively rather than alone. Ford's intelligence has one more crucial limitation that the show explores. When Ford finally confronts Bill during Weirdmageddon, Ford's response is to try to fight Bill on Bill's terms, through intellect and technology. He tries to blast Bill back to his own dimension with a weapon. He tries to outsmart Bill with scientific knowledge. He tries to resist Bill through willpower and mental fortitude. All of these approaches fail because they're playing Bill's game. Bill has had 1 trillion years to develop his intellectual and magical capabilities. Ford has had 60. On the playing field of pure intelligence and power, Ford cannot win. The solution that actually defeats Bill comes not from Ford's intelligence, but from Stan's. Ford's role in the final plan is to operate the memory gun, not to confront Bill directly. Ford has to accept that his brother, the supposed screw-up, the one their father dismissed as worthless, is the one who can do what Ford cannot. This acceptance is one of Ford's greatest moments of genuine intelligence, because it requires him to recognize that his own strengths are insufficient and that someone else's strengths are needed. True intelligence includes knowing your limitations, and Ford's willingness to defer to Stan in the final confrontation shows that he's finally learned this lesson. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Academic genius, with its ambitions and blind spots, represents one form of brilliance. But another character demonstrates that intelligence doesn't need degrees or laboratories. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is refuse to give up on someone for 30 years. Stanley Pines might be the most underestimated character in the entire Gravity Falls universe. While his brother Ford is celebrated as a genius, while Bill Cipher commands cosmic power and knowledge accumulated over 1 trillion years, Stan operates with a form of intelligence that the show argues is ultimately more important than any of them. Stan's intelligence isn't academic. It isn't supernatural. It's practical, emotional, and rooted in an understanding of people that no textbook or interdimensional journey could teach. And in the end, it's Stan's intelligence that defeats Bill Cipher, the most powerful being in the show's universe. The character dismissed by his own father as a screw-up is the one who saves everything. Stan grew up alongside Ford in Glasshard Beach, and from childhood, the brothers were defined in opposition to each other. Ford was the smart one. Stan was the tough one. Ford won science fairs. Stan got into fights. Their father Philbrick saw Ford as an investment, a brain that would generate returns in prestige and money. Stan was overhead, the cost of having a twin who wasn't useful. Philbrick never said it this directly, but the message was clear enough that it shaped Stan's entire understanding of his own worth. Stan internalized the belief that he wasn't smart, that his kind of intelligence didn't count, that he was the lesser twin in the only category that mattered. This family dynamic is crucial to understanding Stan's intelligence because it explains why Stan's genius went unrecognized for so long, including by Stan himself. Stan's intelligence is in reading people, navigating social situations, adapting to changing circumstances, and persisting through difficulties that would break most people. These capabilities are genuine cognitive achievements, but they don't produce visible credentials. There's no diploma for being able to read a room. No award for surviving on your wits when you're 18 and homeless. No recognition for the kind of intelligence that keeps you alive and functional when the world has decided you're worthless. When Stan accidentally damaged Ford's perpetual motion machine, costing Ford his chance at West Coast Tech, their father threw Stan out of the house, just like that. 18 years old, no money, no skills, no support network. Philbrick told Stan not to come back until he'd made them a fortune to replace what Ford's scholarship would have provided. Stan drove away in his car, alone, with nothing, branded a failure by his own family. What Stan did next is where his intelligence begins to reveal itself in earnest. He survived 4 years, across dozens of states and multiple countries, running cons, selling questionable products, dodging law enforcement, scraping together enough to eat and sleep and keep moving. Stan was banned from over 32 states. He was thrown in jail in at least 3 countries. He chewed his way out of a car trunk. He lived in apartments so terrible they made the junkyard look appealing. He operated under multiple aliases, maintained various cover stories, and stayed one step ahead of people who were actively trying to catch him. This period of Stan's life developed a form of intelligence that operates in realms completely different from Ford's academic brilliance. Stan learned how people think, not from textbooks about psychology or sociology, from watching thousands of faces react to thousands of sales pitches. He learned what makes people trust someone, what makes them suspicious, what phrases open wallets, what body language closes deals. He learned to read rooms instantly, to assess threat levels in seconds, to adapt his persona to match whatever a situation demanded. He could be charming, intimidating, sympathetic, or authoritative, depending on what was needed. This chameleon-like social intelligence requires constant processing of complex social information and real-time adaptation to feedback. Running successful cons requires a specific constellation of cognitive abilities that most people don't appreciate. You need to understand your mark's psychology, identify their vulnerabilities, construct a narrative that exploits those vulnerabilities, maintain that narrative under pressure, handle unexpected complications without breaking character, and exit the situation before the deception is discovered. Every step requires intelligence, Reading the mark requires social perception. Constructing the con requires narrative intelligence and creative thinking. Maintaining the deception requires acting ability and emotional regulation. Handling complications requires adaptive thinking and quick decision-making. Exiting cleanly requires strategic planning and situational awareness. Stan did all of this for years, across dozens of states and multiple countries. As a young man with no formal training in any of these skills, he learned everything through trial and error, which is itself a form of intelligence because it means he could learn from failure, adjust his approach, and improve his performance through experience rather than instruction. Stan's school was the road, his textbooks were the faces of the people he encountered, and his exams were the daily challenge of staying alive and free. When Ford invited Stan to Gravity Falls, it wasn't to reconnect as brothers. It was to give Stan one of the journals and send him as far away as possible to keep it safe from Bill. Stan's emotional intelligence revealed itself immediately. He understood that Ford wasn't asking to reconcile. Ford was using him, treating him like a courier service rather than a brother. And Stan's reaction, his anger and hurt at being treated as a tool rather than family, shows emotional perception that Ford's intellectual brilliance couldn't match. Ford was so focused on the strategic problem of keeping the journal safe that he couldn't see the emotional reality of what he was doing to his brother. Stan saw it immediately because Stan's intelligence operates in the emotional register that Ford's intelligence overlooks. The fight that followed, the one that accidentally reactivated the portal and pulled Ford into another dimension, left Stan alone in Ford's cabin with a broken machine, one journal, and the knowledge that his brother was lost somewhere in the space between realities. This is the moment that defines Stan's intelligence more clearly than any other in the series. Any reasonable person would have given up. The portal was built by one of the most brilliant scientists alive, with the help of an equally brilliant engineer and the guidance of an interdimensional demon. Repairing it with 1/3 of the blueprints and no formal education in any relevant field should have been impossible. The mathematics alone would challenge someone with a doctoral degree in physics. The engineering required understanding of dimensional stability, power generation, and material science that existed in no textbook. Stan had a high school education at best, one journal written in code and scientific notation he couldn't initially read, and nothing else except the stubborn refusal to accept that his brother was gone forever. Stan spent 30 years doing it anyway. Let the weight of that settle in for a moment. 30 years. That's longer than many people's entire careers. Stan devoted 3 decades of his life to a single project that required him to teach himself skills that normally take years of formal education to develop. He had to learn to read Ford's scientific notation. He had to understand the physics of dimensional travel well enough to identify what was broken. He had to figure out the engineering required to repair or replace damaged components. He had to source materials and equipment, which he funded by turning Ford's cabin into the Mystery Shack, a tourist trap that generated enough income to support both Stan's living expenses and the ongoing costs of the portal project. The show doesn't present Stan's 30-year effort as a montage or a joke. It presents it as one of the most remarkable achievements in the series. And when you compare what Stan accomplished to what other characters needed, the scale of his achievement becomes even more impressive. Ford built the portal with a doctoral degree, decades of research experience, a brilliant engineering partner in McGucket, and guidance from an interdimensional being with 1 trillion years of knowledge. Stan repaired the portal with none of those advantages. Ford had 3 journals worth of blueprints. Stan had 1. Ford had Bill whispering answers in his ear. Stan had nothing but his own determination and the slowly developing capability to read and understand scientific documents that were never written for someone at his level. Ford himself couldn't have done what Stan did. The show makes this point explicitly. Ford needed McGucket's help to build the portal. Stan repaired it alone. Ford had Bill's guidance for the theoretical components. Stan had no guidance at all. The fact that Stan could take a machine designed by people with vastly more knowledge and resources and repair it through sheer persistence and self-taught skill is arguably the most impressive intellectual achievement in the entire series. It's not the flashiest. It doesn't involve dimensional travel or supernatural power. But in terms of the gap between starting capability and ending achievement, nothing else in Gravity Falls comes close. This sustained effort demonstrates multiple forms of intelligence working together over an extraordinary period. Stan showed mechanical intelligence in understanding and repairing complex machinery. He showed autodidactic capability in teaching himself science and engineering. He showed business intelligence in creating and running the Mystery Shack. He showed strategic intelligence in maintaining his cover identity as Ford, faking Stan's own death in a car crash to avoid complications, and evading federal and international authorities who had records of his criminal past. He showed emotional intelligence in channeling his guilt and love for his brother into productive action rather than despair or self-destruction. And he showed determination that amplified every other form of intelligence he possessed. Stan is proof that willpower is itself a cognitive multiplier, that caring enough about something can make you capable of things that raw talent alone cannot achieve. Throughout the series, Stan's ability to read people proves consistently valuable. He understands what motivates the tourists who visit the Mystery Shack. He recognizes Gideon Gleeful as a fraud and a threat from their very first encounter. He knows when Dipper and Mabel are in trouble, even when they're trying to hide it. He can tell when someone is lying, when someone is scared, and when someone needs help, even though they'd never ask for it. His social perception is quick and accurate, developed through decades of reading strangers for his cons and reading dangerous people for his survival. Stan's emotional intelligence with his great niece and nephew shows a depth that surprises people who see him only as a greedy con man. He recognizes that Dipper needs confidence and encouragement, even though Stan expresses this through rough humor rather than gentle words. He understands that Mabel needs to feel valued and creative. He knows when to push the kids toward independence and when to protect them from threats they're not ready for. Stan's parenting instincts aren't perfect, but they're remarkably good for someone who never had children of his own and whose primary role models for family dynamics were a dismissive father and an absent brother. The culmination of Stan's intelligence comes in the series finale. When Bill needs the equation to escape Gravity Falls' weirdness barrier, he targets Ford, who knows the formula. Bill captures both twins and tries to extract the information from Ford's mind. The Pines family devises a plan where Stan and Ford switch clothes and identities. Stan pretends to be Ford and offers to make a deal with Bill, agreeing to let Bill into his mind in exchange for the family's safety. Bill, despite being a trillion-year-old demon with near-omniscient knowledge and centuries of experience manipulating the greatest minds in history, falls for it. This moment requires the most detailed examination because it represents the ultimate test of Stan's intelligence against the ultimate intelligent being in the show's universe. Bill has known Ford personally. He spent months or years inside Ford's mind, studying his thoughts, his personality, his mannerisms, his knowledge. Bill should be able to tell the difference between Ford and someone pretending to be Ford, and yet Stan's performance is convincing enough to fool him. Stan's con artistry, his lifetime of deception and performance and social manipulation, allowed him to impersonate his brother so completely that a being who had literally been inside that brother's mind couldn't tell the difference. There's also a deeper layer to why this works. Ford himself provides the answer when he tells Stan that Stan would have seen through Bill immediately, that Stan would have recognized Bill for the scam artist he is. The show is explicitly stating that Stan's street smarts represent a form of intelligence that Bill cannot simulate or overcome. Bill's approach to manipulation relies on appealing to intellectual vanity, to the desire for knowledge, to the ego of brilliant people who want to be recognized as special. This approach worked on Ford because Ford's intelligence operated in the realm of ideas where Bill could construct convincing narratives. Stan is immune to this approach because Stan's intelligence operates in the realm of people and motivations. Stan has spent his entire adult life identifying cons, running cons, and recognizing when someone is trying to sell him something. Bill's smooth talk, his promises, his flattery, all of these would register to Stan not as cosmic wisdom, but as a sales pitch. Stan would hear Bill's approach and think he sounds like every con man Stan has ever met, including Stan himself. And you can't con a con man with a con he's been running his whole life. When Bill enters Stan's mind, thinking he's entering Ford's, and Ford fires the memory gun, Bill realizes too late what's happened. He's trapped in a mind that's being erased, and there's no way out. Bill's reaction shows something we've never seen from him before: genuine panic, genuine helplessness. For the first time in 1 trillion years, Bill is in a situation his intelligence cannot escape. He offers Stan everything: his own galaxy, unlimited power, whatever Stan wants. Stan's response defines his character and his intelligence in a single moment. He refuses everything Bill offers. Not because Stan doesn't want things. Stan has spent his entire life wanting things. Wanting money and respect and recognition and his brother back. Stan refuses because he understands something that Bill's intelligence cannot grasp. Stan understands that some things are not for sale. That some decisions transcend calculation. That loving your family means being willing to give up everything, including yourself, to protect them. Stan says he was good for something after all. This line carries the weight of an entire lifetime of feeling worthless, of being told he was the lesser twin, of being thrown out of his home and spending years as a failure and a criminal. Stan spent his whole life believing he wasn't smart enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't valuable enough to matter. And in the final moment, his particular form of intelligence, his street smarts, his emotional depth, his willingness to sacrifice, turns out to be the only thing in the universe that can defeat Bill Cipher. The screw-up saves everything. After the memory gun erases Stan's mind, his family gathers around him and begins sharing stories, showing photographs, and recreating the experiences they shared together. Stan's memories begin to return. The fact that Stan's mind can be rebuilt through emotional connections reinforces the show's argument about intelligence. Stan's deepest knowledge isn't stored in facts or formulas. It's stored in relationships. His intelligence is relational, built on connections with people, and those connections prove more durable than the memory gun's attempt to erase them. Science can destroy memories. Love can bring them back. And Stan's story demonstrates that the intelligence built on love is the most resilient form of intelligence there is. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Street smarts and emotional intelligence prove that genius doesn't require degrees. And another character demonstrates what happens when brilliance encounters horror and the terrible price of knowing too much. Fiddleford McGucket is one of the most tragic demonstrations of intelligence in Gravity Falls. He is a character who was once a brilliant inventor and engineer, Ford Pines' equal in many respects, and whose intelligence was systematically destroyed by his own invention. A device he created because his mind was too sensitive, too perceptive, too capable of understanding what it had seen. McGucket's story is about what happens when intelligence encounters horror it cannot process, and how the attempt to escape from knowledge can cost you everything you are. In his prime, McGucket was extraordinary. He attended Backups University alongside Ford, where Ford described him as a young but brilliant mechanic. But calling McGucket a mechanic undersells his capabilities dramatically. After graduation, McGucket moved to Palo Alto, California, where he established a personal computer business called Fiddleford McGucket. This was during the early days of personal computing, before the industry existed as we know it. McGucket was designing and building portable personal computers in his garage at a time when most people had never seen a computer outside of a university or government installation. Think about the historical context. The personal computer revolution that created companies worth trillions of dollars started with people working in garages in Silicon Valley. McGucket was one of those people. He was building computing technology that was years ahead of the commercial market. He designed both the hardware and the software himself, demonstrating expertise in electronics, programming, user interface design, and product engineering. If McGucket had stayed on this path, he could have been a founder of the modern technology industry. He could have been a name alongside the giants of Silicon Valley who transformed the world through personal computing. Instead, McGucket answered a call from Ford asking for help building an interdimensional portal in the woods of Oregon, and everything changed. McGucket's engineering intelligence was crucial to the portal's construction. Ford had the theoretical knowledge and the guidance from Bill Cipher, but he needed someone who could translate those theories into functioning machinery. McGucket was that person. He understood how to take Ford's equations and turn them into circuits, mechanisms, and systems that actually worked. He designed a prototype laptop to track the portal's research, a device that could interface with the portal's systems and display complex dimensional data. This wasn't just a computer. It was a specialized scientific instrument that could process information about dimensional physics in real time. The technological sophistication of McGucket's contributions to the Portal project matches or exceeds anything Ford accomplished on his own. McGucket also designed a biomechanical brainwave generator, a device that interfaces directly with neural patterns to control machinery. This is neurotechnology of a kind that modern science is only beginning to approach. McGucket understood the intersection of biology and electronics well enough to build devices that could read brain signals, interpret them, and translate them into commands for mechanical systems. This kind of work requires expertise in neuroscience, electrical engineering, computer science, and biology simultaneously. McGucket wasn't just an engineer. He was a polymath whose knowledge spanned multiple fields and whose practical skills could synthesize those fields into functioning technology. Throughout the series, even in his diminished state as Old Man McGucket, his engineering genius shows through. The Gobblewonker, a massive mechanical sea monster he built from junkyard scraps, demonstrates robotics capabilities that would challenge teams of engineers at major universities. The robot is mobile, autonomous to some degree, and controlled through a personally designed computer system. McGucket built it from garbage, not from precision machine components or carefully sourced materials, from literal junk. The fact that he could construct a functional robot of that size and complexity from discarded materials shows an intuitive understanding of mechanics and engineering that transcends formal methodology. McGucket doesn't need proper tools or materials. He can see how things fit together and make them work regardless of what he has available. He also built a homicidal pterodactyl robot when his wife left him, and an 80-ton shamebot when his friend Ernie didn't come to his retirement party. These machines are not small projects. They're massive engineering achievements that he apparently completed quickly and alone while in a state of severe mental decline. The intelligence required to design and build machines of this scale doesn't disappear just because the person's memory and personality have been damaged. McGucket's engineering genius is so fundamental to who he is that it persists even through decades of cognitive deterioration. The moment that changed everything came when McGucket was accidentally pulled through the portal during its first test. For a brief moment, he glimpsed the other side. He saw the nightmare realm. He saw Bill Cipher's true nature. Specifically, Bill removing his exoskeleton to feed a detail so disturbing that it traumatized McGucket to his core. He came back screaming. He predicted that an apocalyptic catastrophe would follow if the portal reached full operation. He begged Ford to shut everything down. Ford refused. His intellectual pride and his attachment to his life's work and to Bill's validation were too strong. McGucket quit the project, but he couldn't quit what he'd seen. The visions haunted him. The knowledge of Bill's true nature consumed him with paranoia and insomnia. McGucket's intelligence, his extraordinary ability to perceive and understand what he'd witnessed, became a torture device that his own mind inflicted on itself. He understood the danger clearly enough to be terrified by it every waking moment and in every dream, but he couldn't do anything to stop it, and he couldn't make anyone else believe him. This is where McGucket's intelligence took its devastating turn. He used his genius to build the memory erasing gun, a device capable of selectively removing specific memories from a person's mind. The technology behind this device is remarkable on multiple levels. It combines what appears to be transcranial magnetic stimulation with targeted memory identification and selective erasure. The device can locate specific memories in a person's brain, isolate them from surrounding neural connections, and remove them while leaving everything else intact. The memories can even be stored in a canister attached to the gun for potential later retrieval. As a feat of neurotechnology, the memory gun is arguably the most impressive invention in the entire show. More impressive than the portal because it demonstrates understanding and manipulation of the human brain at a level that makes modern neuroscience look primitive. The portal required understanding of physics and dimensional science. The memory gun requires understanding of neurology, memory formation, neural architecture, and cognitive function at resolutions that don't exist in real-world science. McGucket built a device that can read the brain's memory structures, identify specific memories among billions of stored experiences, and remove those specific memories without causing collateral damage to surrounding cognitive functions, at least initially. McGucket used the memory gun on himself to erase what he'd seen through the portal. It worked. The nightmares stopped, the paranoia faded, but the relief was temporary because Gravity Falls is full of supernatural phenomena, and McGucket kept encountering things that traumatized him. Each new encounter with the supernatural brought new horror that he needed to erase. He founded the Blind Eye Society, a secret organization dedicated to helping the people of Gravity Falls forget their encounters with the inexplicable. The memory gun became both a public service and a personal addiction. The side effects accumulated with devastating predictability. Each use of the device caused incremental brain damage. Memory loss spread beyond targeted memories into general cognitive function. McGucket's personality changed. His speech patterns deteriorated. His ability to think clearly, to plan, to maintain coherent thoughts for extended periods, all of these capabilities degraded with each pull of the trigger. By the early 1980s, Fiddleford McGucket, brilliant engineer, computer pioneer, neurotechnologist, and one of the most capable minds in Gravity Falls' history, had been reduced to Old Man McGucket, the town's deranged junkyard-dwelling hermit. He'd forgotten his own name, his family, his accomplishments, and virtually everything that made him who he was. The tragedy is a closed loop. McGucket's intelligence allowed him to see the truth about Bill and the portal. That truth traumatized him. His intelligence allowed him to build a device to erase the trauma. That device destroyed the intelligence that built it. The very capabilities that made McGucket brilliant, his perception, his understanding, his ability to translate knowledge into technology, combined to create a chain of events that consumed him completely. McGucket was too smart to unsee what he'd seen, too capable to resist building a solution, and too damaged by that solution to ever fully recover. The show treats McGucket's recovery arc with genuine care. In the episode Society of the Blind Eye, Dipper and his friends discover the organization McGucket founded and help him recover some of his erased memories. The process is painful. McGucket has to confront decades of forgotten trauma and lost identity. But the recovery also reveals something important. McGucket's genius was damaged but not destroyed. The engineering skills persisted through the cognitive damage. The personality traits that made him kind and creative survived in diminished but recognizable form. The intelligence was still in there, buried under layers of self-inflicted damage, but fundamentally intact. By the time Weirdmageddon arrives, McGucket has recovered enough of his former capabilities to become a crucial ally. He builds the Shacktron, a giant mech suit constructed from the Mystery Shack itself, powered by interdimensional technology, and controlled through a system that McGucket designs and builds under wartime conditions with limited resources and time. The Shacktron fights Bill's forces directly and holds its own against beings of enormous power. This engineering achievement, accomplished by a man who was a junkyard hermit months earlier, demonstrates that McGucket's genius, when recovered and properly directed, operates at the highest levels shown in the series. The emotional scene between McGucket and Ford during Weirdmageddon is one of the most important moments in the show. Ford approaches McGucket and says that McGucket must hate him for what happened. For dragging McGucket into the portal project, for refusing to shut it down when McGucket begged him to, for the chain of events that destroyed McGucket's mind and his life. McGucket's response is simple and devastating. He says he spent so many years trying to forget and that maybe it's time he tried to forgive. This moment demonstrates emotional intelligence that surpasses anything the academic geniuses of the show demonstrate. McGucket has every right to be furious. Ford's arrogance and his refusal to listen to McGucket's warnings led directly to the destruction of McGucket's mind, his marriage, his career, and his identity. McGucket lost everything because Ford wouldn't stop building a machine for a demon, and McGucket's response is forgiveness. Not because what Ford did was okay, not because the consequences weren't devastating, but because McGucket understands that holding onto anger serves no one, that the crisis they're facing requires cooperation, and that the past cannot be changed, but the future can still be shaped by the choices they make now. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. A genius destroyed and rebuilt shows the vulnerability of intelligence, and the next character demonstrates that the youngest minds can sometimes see what the oldest and most experienced minds miss. Dipper Pines is 12 years old when he arrives in Gravity Falls, and by the time summer ends, he's demonstrated a form of intelligence that rivals some of the most powerful minds the town has ever seen. Dipper's intelligence isn't based on advanced degrees or supernatural knowledge, it's based on something more fundamental: curiosity that refuses to quit, an analytical mind that never stops asking questions, and the ability to connect pieces of information that other people overlook, dismiss, or are too afraid to examine. What makes Dipper's intelligence significant in the context of Gravity Falls is that it operates differently from every other smart character in the show. Ford's intelligence is academic and theoretical. Stan's intelligence is practical and social. Bill's intelligence is cosmic and manipulative. McGucket's intelligence is engineering and inventive. Dipper's intelligence is investigative. He approaches the world like a detective, gathering clues, forming hypotheses, testing those hypotheses against evidence, and revising his understanding when the evidence demands it. This scientific method, applied instinctively by a 12-year-old to supernatural mysteries, produces results that surprise characters who've spent decades studying the same phenomena. Dipper finds journal number 3 in the woods during his first week in Gravity Falls. It's hidden in a compartment inside a metal tree, clearly placed there by someone who wanted it to be found, but not easily. Dipper discovers it because he's exploring, investigating, pushing into the woods further than most people would go. The discovery itself demonstrates Dipper's investigative nature. He doesn't find the journal by accident. He finds it because he's the kind of person who notices when a tree sounds hollow, who investigates when something doesn't look right, who follows his curiosity into places that might be dangerous because the need to know is stronger than the fear of what he might find. Most kids who found a strange journal filled with drawings of monsters and coded messages would either ignore it, get scared, or show it to an adult. Dipper does none of these things. He reads the journal cover to cover. He begins decoding its messages. He starts using it as a field guide for investigating the supernatural activity around him. This shows not just intelligence, but intellectual courage. Dipper isn't afraid of knowledge. He wants more of it, even when that knowledge points toward genuinely dangerous things. In the very first episode, the journal leads him to discover that gnomes are real, that they want to kidnap his sister, and that the world is much stranger and more dangerous than he previously believed. His response is not to put the journal away and pretend everything is normal. His response is to keep reading. The way Dipper uses the journal throughout the series demonstrates analytical intelligence of a high order. He cross-references information from different entries, identifying patterns that the original author might not have noticed or didn't document. He applies the journal's knowledge to situations the author never encountered, adapting general principles to specific new challenges. He supplements the journal's information with his own observations and experiments, treating it as a starting point rather than a definitive authority. When the journal tells him something that conflicts with what he observes in the field, Dipper trusts his observations and questions the journal. This is how genuine scientific thinking works. You take existing knowledge, test it against reality, and build new understanding where the existing knowledge falls short. Dipper's analytical approach is evident in specific episodes throughout the series. In the episode Headhunters, Dipper investigates the destruction of a wax statue by treating it as a crime scene. He examines evidence, interviews suspects, follows leads, and pieces together the truth through deductive reasoning. His investigation is systematic and thorough, following the same logical structure that professional investigators use. He identifies the murder weapon, traces it to its source, and confronts the perpetrators. The fact that a 12-year-old can conduct a functional investigation without any training shows natural, analytical intelligence that simply needs experience and opportunity to develop. In the episode Into the Bunker, Dipper discovers Ford's hidden laboratory and encounters the Shapeshifter, one of the most dangerous creatures Ford ever documented. Dipper's response to this encounter shows intelligence under pressure. He quickly identifies the Shapeshifter's capabilities and limitations from the journal's description. He develops a strategy for dealing with the creature based on that information. When the situation changes and the original strategy fails, he adapts in real time and finds alternative solutions. He doesn't freeze or panic when faced with a genuinely life-threatening situation. He thinks, observes, and acts based on the best available information. Ford himself acknowledges Dipper's intelligence by describing Dipper as a younger version of himself. This comparison is important because it comes from someone qualified to make it. Ford has spent decades studying Gravity Falls' anomalies and has encountered some of the most dangerous supernatural phenomena in existence. When Ford sees Dipper's analytical approach, his systematic investigation methods, and his refusal to accept mysteries without explanation, Ford recognizes the same qualities that drove his own research. Ford's recognition validates Dipper's intelligence as genuine rather than just precocious. But the show also uses Dipper to demonstrate something that Ford's character doesn't, which is the ability to grow and learn from mistakes rather than being trapped by them. In the episode The Time Traveler's Pig, Dipper uses a time travel device to repeatedly alter the past in an attempt to win Wendy's affection. Each attempt fails in different ways, teaching Dipper about the consequences of manipulating events and the limits of his ability to control outcomes. Eventually, Dipper has to choose between getting what he wants and allowing Mabel to keep Waddles, the pig she loves. Dipper chooses Mabel. This decision shows emotional intelligence developing alongside analytical intelligence. Dipper learns that being smart enough to manipulate situations doesn't mean you should, and that sometimes the right choice requires giving up what you want for someone else's happiness. Dipper's intelligence also manifests in his relationship with mystery and the unknown. Unlike Ford, who approaches the supernatural with a desire to catalog and control it, Dipper approaches it with genuine wonder alongside his analytical curiosity. He's scared by what he encounters, but his fear doesn't override his fascination. He wants to understand the supernatural, not just for intellectual achievement, but because understanding brings him closer to feeling at home in a world that often confuses and overwhelms him. Dipper's birthmark, the Big Dipper constellation on his forehead, marks him as someone who is literally mapped to the stars, someone whose identity is connected to patterns and meaning making. His intelligence is driven by a need to find patterns in chaos, to make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense. One of Dipper's most impressive intellectual moments comes during Weirdmageddon, when Bill's chaos has overwhelmed Gravity Falls and most of the town's adults have been captured or incapacitated. Dipper, alongside Mabel and a small group of survivors, has to develop and execute strategies to navigate a town that's been transformed into a nightmare landscape. Dipper contributes knowledge from the journals, analytical assessment of Bill's weaknesses, and the ability to think strategically under conditions of extreme stress. He doesn't try to do everything himself, which shows the wisdom to recognize his own limitations, and he trusts his team members with crucial responsibilities. What sets Dipper apart from Ford, whose intelligence he mirrors in many ways, is that Dipper learns from Ford's mistakes even as he admires Ford's accomplishments. Ford's intelligence led him into isolation and made him vulnerable to Bill's manipulation. Dipper, despite his similar intellectual nature, maintains his connections with Mabel, Stan, Suze, Wendy, and the broader community of Gravity Falls. He sometimes struggles with these relationships, particularly when his desire for knowledge conflicts with Mabel's desire for fun and normalcy, but he ultimately chooses people over mysteries. This is the choice Ford didn't make at the same age, and it's the choice that keeps Dipper from repeating Ford's path. Dipper's most important intellectual quality might be his willingness to be wrong. Throughout the series, Dipper forms theories that turn out to be incorrect, and he adjusts his thinking when the evidence contradicts his assumptions. He initially suspects Stan of being involved in the town's supernatural activity. He's wrong. He theorizes about the identity of the journal's author based on incomplete information. He's wrong. He assumes certain creatures are threats when they're actually benign. He's wrong. And each time he's wrong, he updates his understanding and moves forward with better information. This flexibility of mind is a hallmark of genuine intelligence. Being smart isn't about always being right. It's about being able to update your beliefs when you encounter new information. The episode Sock Opera demonstrates Dipper's intelligence through the dangerous decision he makes when Bill Cipher offers him a deal. Bill promises Dipper the password to the laptop that could decode the journal's secrets, the identity of the author, the answers to everything Dipper has been investigating all summer. In exchange, Bill asks for a puppet. The word puppet is deliberately vague, and Dipper, despite his usual analytical caution, accepts the deal because his desire for knowledge overwhelms his judgment. Bill takes possession of Dipper's body, revealing that the puppet Bill wanted was Dipper himself. This episode is crucial because it shows Dipper making the same mistake Ford made. Dipper's intelligence, his consuming need to know, makes him vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation that Bill specializes in. Dipper's desire for answers is so powerful that it overrides his critical thinking. He accepts a deal with a being he knows is dangerous because the promise of knowledge is too tempting to resist. This is the same vulnerability that led Ford to trust Bill as a muse. The same blind spot where intellectual hunger creates an opening for manipulation. But Dipper's response to this mistake differs from Ford's in an important way. After losing his body to Bill and having to fight to reclaim it with Mabel's help, Dipper doesn't retreat into paranoia or isolation. He learns from the experience. He recognizes that his desire for knowledge can be a weakness when it becomes obsession. He understands that Bill exploited something real about him. Not a fabricated weakness, but a genuine characteristic that Dipper needs to manage rather than deny. This capacity for self-reflection and growth after failure is a form of intelligence that the show values highly, and it's what distinguishes Dipper's trajectory from Ford's. The episode Northwest Mansion Mystery shows another dimension of Dipper's intelligence. When Pacifica Northwest asks for his help dealing with a ghost haunting her family's mansion, Dipper approaches the situation as an investigator, examining the mansion for clues, researching the history of the Northwest family, and discovering the dark truth behind their wealth and status. Dipper's investigation reveals that the ghost has a legitimate grievance against the Northwest family, who broke a promise to the townspeople over a century ago. Dipper's intelligence here isn't just about solving the ghost problem. It's about understanding the human story behind the supernatural event. He connects historical facts, family secrets, and emotional motivations into a coherent understanding that allows him to resolve the situation through justice rather than force. Dipper's intelligence throughout the series consistently demonstrates the connection between analytical thinking and moral reasoning. He doesn't just solve problems. He thinks about whether his solutions are right. He considers the consequences of his actions for other people. He weighs competing values, like his desire for knowledge against his loyalty to family, and makes decisions that reflect genuine ethical reasoning. This moral dimension of Dipper's intelligence distinguishes him from characters like Bill, whose vast intellect operates without ethical constraints, and from Gideon, whose clever mind serves purely selfish ends. Dipper's intelligence includes a conscience, and that conscience makes his intelligence more complete. The relationship between Dipper and Mabel serves as the show's ultimate demonstration of how different forms of intelligence complement each other. Dipper thinks analytically, Mabel thinks creatively. Dipper processes information through logic, Mabel processes information through emotion. Dipper plans ahead, Mabel improvises. Neither approach is superior, both are necessary, and the show consistently demonstrates that the twins are most effective when they work together, combining their different cognitive styles into an approach that's more flexible and more powerful than either could achieve alone. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Curiosity and analytical thinking show the power of a young mind that refuses to stop asking questions. And the next character demonstrates that intelligence sometimes hides behind glitter and optimism and is no less real for being invisible to people who only recognize one kind of smart. Mabel Pines is regularly underestimated when discussions of intelligence in Gravity Falls come up. She doesn't speak in scientific terminology, she doesn't decode cryptograms or analyze dimensional physics, she doesn't strategize military operations or build impossible machines. Mabel's intelligence operates in a register that most people don't recognize as intelligence at all, particularly in a show that revolves around supernatural mysteries and scientific discovery. She's creative, intuitive, emotionally perceptive, and socially brilliant in ways that prove just as valuable as her brother's analytical mind. The show consistently demonstrates that Mabel's form of intelligence isn't inferior to Dipper's, it's different. And in many critical situations, it's more effective. Mabel's creative intelligence is evident from her first appearance. She designs and makes her own sweaters, each one featuring a different elaborate design, a new creation every single day. This isn't just a character quirk played for comedy, it's evidence of genuine creative capability. Each sweater requires conception of a design, planning of the execution, selection of materials and colors, and the technical skill to produce a finished garment. Mabel's sweaters demonstrate spatial reasoning, color theory understanding, design thinking, and the ability to translate ideas from imagination into physical reality. She's essentially running a one-person fashion design operation from her bedroom, producing new work daily, and the quality and creativity of her output is consistently high. The episode Irrational Treasure provides one of the clearest demonstrations of Mabel's intelligence in action. When Pacifica Northwest mocks Mabel for being silly and weird, Mabel and Dipper discover a conspiracy involving the true founding of Gravity Falls. The mystery requires solving a series of puzzles and following a trail of clues. Mabel is the one who cracks several of these puzzles, using creative and intuitive approaches that Dipper's more methodical analysis doesn't reach. Where Dipper would analyze each clue systematically and sometimes get stuck in analytical loops, Mabel connects clues through patterns, associations, and creative leaps that her right brain thinking perceives naturally. She sees connections that analytical thinking might miss because creative intelligence processes information through different pathways than logical analysis. Mabel's emotional intelligence is arguably her most powerful cognitive ability. She reads people with remarkable accuracy throughout the series, sensing moods, motivations, and hidden feelings that other characters miss entirely. She knows when Dipper is anxious before he says anything. She can tell when Stan is sad behind his gruff exterior. She senses when Wendy is uncomfortable or when Suze needs encouragement. This ability to read people isn't just empathy, although empathy is part of it. It's a form of information processing that takes in facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, word choice, and behavioral patterns, and synthesizes all of that data into accurate assessments of other people's emotional states. The way Mabel navigates social situations shows sophisticated understanding of human dynamics. She can diffuse tension with perfectly timed humor. She can comfort people who are hurting without being condescending or making the moment about herself. She can motivate others by identifying what they need to hear and saying it with genuine sincerity. She forms genuine connections with almost everyone she meets, from magical creatures to hardened criminals to her own complicated family members. Each relationship she builds requires different skills and approaches, and Mabel adapts intuitively to what each person needs from her. Mabel's social intelligence is also evident in how she handles conflict. When she and Dipper disagree, which happens regularly throughout the series, Mabel's approach is fundamentally different from Dipper's. Dipper argues with logic and evidence. Mabel argues with emotional truth. She doesn't try to prove she's right through data. She expresses how she feels and why she feels that way, and she asks others to consider their feelings alongside the facts. This approach is often more effective at resolving conflicts, because most interpersonal disagreements aren't really about facts at all. They're about feelings, values, and relationships. Mabel intuitively understands this in ways that more analytically minded characters struggle to grasp. Mabel's optimism itself is a form of intelligence that the show takes seriously across its entire run. Maintaining hope and positivity in the face of genuine danger and difficulty isn't naive or stupid. It's a choice that requires emotional strength, psychological resilience, and accurate situation assessment. Mabel sees the same threats that Dipper sees. She faces the same dangers, encounters the same monsters, and deals with the same family dysfunction. She chooses to respond with hope rather than fear, with creativity rather than rigidity, with openness rather than defensiveness. This choice isn't the absence of intelligence. It's a different application of intelligence, one that focuses on possibilities rather than problems. The show explores the limits of Mabel's intelligence through her fear of change and loss. Mabel's deepest terror is that summer will end, that she and Dipper will grow apart, that the magical world of Gravity Falls will disappear, and she'll be left in a mundane reality where nothing is special anymore. This fear drives some of her most consequential decisions, including giving Bill Cipher the interdimensional rift because Blendin Blandin, possessed by Bill, promises her a summer that never ends. Mabel doesn't know she's dealing with Bill. She thinks she's accepting a gift from a time traveler, but her vulnerability, her desperate desire to avoid change, is real, and Bill exploits it just as ruthlessly as he exploited Ford's need for validation. Mabel's time in the bubble during Weirdmageddon tests her intelligence in the most fundamental way possible. Bill creates a prison that gives Mabel exactly what she wants, an eternal summer where nothing changes, where her friends are always available, where every day is fun and bright and perfect. The bubble is designed to exploit Mabel's specific psychological vulnerability, her fear of change and loss. Just as Bill's muse persona was designed to exploit Ford's need for validation, Bill understands that the most effective prisons are the ones people choose to stay in. Inside the bubble, Mabel has to confront several false versions of her friends and family. She has Dippy Fresh, a version of Dipper who agrees with everything Mabel says and never challenges her. She has perfect versions of her friends who have no flaws and no needs of their own. She has an eternal summer with no ending, no school, no growing up, no change of any kind. Everything she was afraid of losing is preserved permanently inside the bubble. The key to Mabel's escape is understanding that perfection isn't the same as happiness. Dippy Fresh is agreeable, but he's not Dipper. He doesn't challenge Mabel, and Mabel realizes that being challenged is part of what makes her relationship with Dipper real and valuable. Her perfect friends don't need her, and being needed is part of what makes friendships meaningful. The eternal summer has no stakes, no growth, no consequences, and Mabel realizes that consequences are what give choices their weight and their meaning. This realization requires intelligence of a high order. Mabel has to see through the most sophisticated trap in the entire series, one designed specifically for her by a being who has spent 1 trillion years understanding what people want and how to give it to them in ways that serve his purposes. She has to understand that what she wants and what she needs are different things. She has to accept that growing up, even though it means losing things she loves, is necessary and even good. She has to choose pain over comfort, reality over fantasy, genuine imperfect life over perfect empty illusion. Mabel's decision to leave the bubble and face reality is one of the most powerful demonstrations of intelligence in the series. It requires self-knowledge, the understanding that she's been running from change and that running hasn't helped. It requires emotional courage, the willingness to accept pain as part of a life worth living. It requires wisdom about the nature of happiness, the recognition that genuine joy requires genuine risk, and that safety without authenticity is just a different kind of prison. It requires letting go of the grappling hook and grabbing onto something much harder to hold, which is trust that things will work out even when you can't control them. Mabel also demonstrates her intelligence through specific problem-solving moments throughout the series that don't always get the attention they deserve. In the episode Fight Fighters, Mabel manages the emotional fallout of Dipper and Robbie's rivalry by understanding the underlying emotional dynamics better than either of them does. In the episode The Gulf War, Mabel's competitive intelligence emerges alongside her willingness to recognize when competition has become destructive. In the episode The Last Mabelcorn, Mabel faces a test of purity from a unicorn and has to grapple with questions about whether anyone is truly good, a philosophical challenge that she ultimately resolves through action rather than abstract reasoning, demonstrating that practical wisdom can be its own form of philosophical intelligence. Mabel's contribution to the final battle against Bill demonstrates that emotional intelligence has concrete practical value in crisis situations. While Dipper provides analytical thinking and strategic planning, Mabel provides the emotional fuel that keeps everyone fighting. She motivates others through connection, maintains morale through genuine care, and finds unconventional solutions through creative thinking. When the Zodiac Wheel almost works but fails because Stan and Ford can't stop arguing long enough to join hands, it's the emotional dynamics of the family that Bill exploits. And it's emotional intelligence, understanding how to bring people together, that could have prevented this failure. The show suggests that Mabel's kind of intelligence, had it been fully applied to the family dynamics at the crucial moment, might have ended Weirdmageddon without anyone having to sacrifice their memories. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Creative and emotional intelligence shows that genius takes many forms. And the next character demonstrates how intelligence can be warped by obsession and how a clever mind can become its own worst enemy. Leo Gideon Gleeful is easy to dismiss. He's a child, he's theatrical, he's ridiculous in many ways, with his oversized white pompadour and his tiny suits and his dramatic tantrums when things don't go his way. But beneath the performance, Gideon demonstrates a form of intelligence that's genuinely dangerous. He's a manipulator who can control an entire town's perception. A strategist who nearly took over Gravity Falls through a combination of charm, legal manipulation, and supernatural force. A businessman who runs a profitable entertainment operation at roughly 10 years old, Gideon's intelligence isn't academic or scientific. It's social, manipulative, and performative, and it's amplified by an obsessive drive that makes every ability he possesses more potent and more dangerous. Gideon's primary intelligence is in manipulation and public performance. He's created an entire persona, the psychic child of the tent of telepathy, that charms the adults of Gravity Falls into trusting and adoring him. He understands how to work an audience. He knows which emotional buttons to press. He can project innocence and vulnerability so convincingly that adults who should know better treat him as a sweet child rather than the calculating predator he actually is. His television appearances, his public performances, and his one-on-one interactions all demonstrate understanding of persuasion, emotional manipulation, and image management that would be impressive in a seasoned politician. In a child, it's extraordinary and deeply unsettling. The tent of telepathy itself shows Gideon's business intelligence. He's created a revenue-generating entertainment operation that combines showmanship, fake psychic readings, and merchandise sales into a profitable enterprise. He understands marketing, branding, and customer experience well enough to compete with Stan's Mystery Shack, which is run by an adult with decades of business experience. Gideon has promotional materials, a consistent brand image, a loyal customer base, and commercial slots on local television. He manages his father, who nominally runs the business, as effectively as any CEO manages their board. The business side of Gideon's operation requires understanding of economics, marketing, psychology, and organizational management that most adults never develop. What makes Gideon particularly dangerous is his understanding of how institutional systems work. He nearly acquires the Mystery Shack through legal manipulation, using property law and business regulations to threaten Stan's ownership. He gets the entire town to turn against Stan through public relations and emotional appeals. He builds a robot the size of a building using the information from journal number 2 and uses it to physically attack the Pines family when subtler approaches fail. He maintains relationships with law enforcement, local government, and the media that give him institutional power beyond what a child should possess. This shows intelligence about systems, about how power structures function, and about how to leverage social capital into tangible authority. Gideon's approach to power is particularly sophisticated because it combines multiple vectors of influence simultaneously. He doesn't just use one type of power. He uses charm, legal leverage, economic influence, supernatural force, and public opinion all at the same time, creating a multi-layered assault that's difficult to defend against because blocking one avenue of attack doesn't stop the others. This multi-vector strategy shows strategic thinking that goes beyond simple aggression or manipulation. Gideon understands that the most effective way to achieve a goal is to pursue it through every available channel simultaneously, creating redundancy and pressure from multiple directions. His relationship with Mabel shows another dimension of his manipulative intelligence. Gideon is genuinely infatuated with Mabel, but his approach to the relationship reveals how his intelligence distorts his emotional capacity. He treats Mabel as something to be acquired rather than someone to be respected. He uses charm, gifts, social pressure, and eventually threats and supernatural force to try to make Mabel reciprocate his feelings. He understands the techniques of romantic pursuit well enough to create convincing displays of affection, but he doesn't understand that genuine relationships can't be engineered through manipulation. This disconnect between social intelligence and emotional intelligence makes Gideon dangerous specifically because he has the tools to simulate genuine feeling without actually experiencing it. Gideon's use of the supernatural shows strategic intelligence applied to resource acquisition and deployment. He discovers journal number 2 and immediately recognizes its value as a tool for enhancing his power. Unlike Dipper, who uses the journal for investigation and understanding, Gideon uses it for domination and control. He identifies the entries that can give him direct advantages, particularly the mystic amulet that amplifies telekinetic abilities, and he exploits those resources systematically. Gideon approaches the journals not as mysteries to be solved, but as arsenals to be raided, and this approach reflects his fundamentally acquisitive orientation toward intelligence. Knowledge, for Gideon, is not an end in itself. It's a means to power. His construction of the Gideon bot, a massive mech suit built from the blueprints in journal number 2, shows that Gideon's intelligence extends beyond pure social manipulation into technical domains. He can read complex technical blueprints, coordinate construction of advanced technology, and operate sophisticated machinery. The Gideon bot is a genuine engineering achievement, and the fact that Gideon could bring it from blueprint to functioning reality shows technical intelligence that's often overlooked because it's overshadowed by his more dramatic social manipulation. His summoning of Bill's Cipher demonstrates both intelligence and the limits of that intelligence. Gideon is smart enough to figure out the summoning ritual from journal number 2, negotiate terms with a cosmic demon, and direct Bill toward a specific target. Bill's task is to break into Stan's mind and find the combination to the safe where the deed to the mystery shack is kept. Gideon frames the deal in transactional terms, treating Bill like a contractor being hired for a specific job. But Gideon is too blinded by his own ambition to understand what he's really dealing with. He doesn't recognize that Bill has his own agenda, and that any deal with Bill is ultimately a deal that serves Bill's interests more than anyone else's. The parallel between Gideon's mistake with Bill and Ford's mistake with Bill is deliberate and important. Both are intelligent people who accessed dangerous supernatural power because they believed they could control it. Both were wrong. Ford was deceived because his ego made him vulnerable to flattery. Gideon is deceived because his obsession makes him reckless. The show uses both characters to demonstrate that intelligence without wisdom is dangerous, regardless of the form that intelligence takes. Ford's academic brilliance and Gideon's manipulative skill are both genuine forms of intelligence, and both prove insufficient when dealing with forces that are beyond the wielder's control. When Gideon is finally defeated and sent to prison at the end of season 1, his intelligence doesn't disappear. He continues scheming from inside his cell, maintaining influence over other prisoners, and planning his eventual return. The fact that a child can establish authority within a prison population shows the sheer force of Gideon's social intelligence and manipulative capability. He's placed in an environment designed to contain dangerous adults, and he quickly becomes one of the most influential figures there. This isn't just comic exaggeration. It's a demonstration that Gideon's particular type of intelligence, the ability to read people, identify leverage points, and construct social hierarchies that benefit himself, works in any environment where there are people to manipulate. Gideon's redemption arc during Weirdmageddon shows his intelligence developing in a new direction. When Bill's chaos threatens everyone, including Gideon himself, he has to reassess his priorities. The world Gideon wanted to dominate is being destroyed by a force far greater than anything he ever commanded. Gideon fights alongside the townspeople against Bill's forces, directing his strategic intelligence toward defense and survival rather than acquisition and domination. His willingness to change sides shows adaptability and the capacity for growth that suggests Gideon's intelligence, when freed from obsession, could develop in genuinely positive directions. His intelligence was always real. It was the application of that intelligence that was corrupted. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Manipulative intelligence shows what cleverness looks like when it's corrupted by obsession. And the remaining characters demonstrate that intelligence doesn't always announce itself with grand achievements. Sometimes the smartest people in the room are the ones holding everything together from the background. Wendy Corduroy demonstrates what might be called survival intelligence, the ability to assess threats, maintain composure under pressure, and make effective decisions in chaotic situations. Wendy grew up in a family of lumberjacks led by her father Manly Dan, people who work with dangerous equipment in dangerous environments every day. This background gave her practical skills and mental toughness that translate directly to the supernatural challenges of Gravity Falls. Wendy's intelligence wasn't developed in classrooms or laboratories. It was developed in forests where trees can fall on you, where weather changes without warning, and where the difference between a good day and a hospital visit is paying attention to what's happening around you. Wendy's most impressive intellectual quality is her metacognitive awareness, which means she knows what she knows and what she doesn't know. This sounds simple, but it's actually one of the most advanced forms of intelligence there is. Most people overestimate their capabilities in some areas and underestimate them in others. Wendy doesn't. When the Pines family faces supernatural threats, Wendy accurately assesses her own capabilities relative to the situation. She knows when she can handle something herself, like fighting gnomes or navigating dangerous terrain. She knows when she needs to follow someone else's lead, like when Dipper has journal knowledge that she doesn't. She doesn't pretend to understand dimensional physics or supernatural lore, and she doesn't feel diminished by not understanding these things. She identifies her own strengths, deploys them effectively, and trusts others to handle what she can't. This kind of honest self-assessment is rare and valuable in the world of Gravity Falls. Ford can't do it consistently. His pride prevents him from acknowledging his limitations until those limitations have already caused catastrophic damage. Bill certainly can't do it. His ego won't allow him to recognize things he doesn't understand, which is ultimately what gets him destroyed. Even Dipper struggles with it, sometimes trying to solve problems that are beyond his current ability rather than asking for help. Wendy does it naturally, almost effortlessly, and this ability makes her one of the most reliable team members in any crisis the show presents. During Weirdmageddon, Wendy becomes one of the most effective fighters and strategists in the Resistance. She navigates Bill's transformed Gravity Falls with a steadiness that keeps the people around her functioning when panic would otherwise take over. She fights effectively in combat situations, making split-second tactical decisions about when to engage and when to retreat. She reads the chaos around her and identifies patterns, safe routes, and opportunities that others miss in their fear. She provides emotional stability for the younger members of the group, particularly Dipper, who looks to her as an anchor during the worst moments of the crisis. Her intelligence is physical, spatial, and situational. She processes threats in real time, evaluates multiple options simultaneously, and selects courses of action that maximize survival chances for herself and the people she's protecting. The episode Into the Bunker demonstrates Wendy's intelligence particularly well. When the group discovers Ford's hidden laboratory and encounters the shapeshifter, one of the most dangerous creatures ever documented in the journals, Wendy maintains her composure while the situation deteriorates around her. She fights the creature physically when necessary, reads the spatial layout of the bunker accurately enough to identify escape routes under pressure, and helps execute the plan to seal the shapeshifter back in its cryogenic containment. Her actions require physical courage, spatial intelligence about an unfamiliar environment, and tactical thinking about how to contain a threat that is stronger, faster, and more adaptable than any human. Wendy's emotional intelligence deserves particular attention because it operates in contexts where other forms of intelligence fail. She's the character who most directly and successfully addresses Dipper's crush on her, and she handles it with a maturity that demonstrates sophisticated understanding of emotions, relationships, and interpersonal dynamics. In Into the Bunker, after Dipper finally confesses his feelings, Wendy responds with honesty, kindness, and clarity. She explains that the age difference matters, that she values their friendship deeply, and that she doesn't want to lose what they have. This response requires emotional skill that many adults never develop. She has to be truthful without being cruel, clear without being dismissive, and caring without being misleading. She reads Dipper's emotional state accurately and calibrates her response to preserve his dignity while being honest about her own feelings. The result is a conversation that strengthens their friendship rather than destroying it, which is exactly what a response crafted with genuine emotional intelligence would achieve. Wendy also demonstrates social intelligence throughout the series through her ability to navigate complex group dynamics. She notices when tensions between the Pines family members are building toward destructive confrontations. She intervenes subtly when Dipper is pushing himself too hard or when Mabel is struggling with anxiety. She reads rooms instinctively, understanding the emotional temperature of any situation and adjusting her own behavior to help stabilize things. This behind-the-scenes social management requires constant observation, accurate assessment of multiple people's emotional states simultaneously, and the ability to calibrate her interventions precisely enough that they help without creating new problems or making people feel managed. The episode Weirdmageddon Part 2 shows Wendy at her most resourceful. While trapped in Bill's transformed Gravity Falls, Wendy has to survive without the support structures that normally back her up. She scavenges supplies, navigates dangerous territory, avoids Bill's minions, and maintains enough hope and composure to keep fighting when the situation seems hopeless. This survival intelligence isn't just about physical toughness. It's about mental resilience, the ability to keep thinking clearly and making good decisions when everything around you is designed to make you give up. Suze Ramirez presents a different kind of intelligence entirely. On the surface, Suze seems simple. He's focused on food, fun, and being enthusiastic about things that more cynical characters dismiss. He laughs at danger rather than analyzing it. He approaches problems with optimism rather than strategy. He doesn't present as intellectually sophisticated, and he'd probably be the first to say he's not the smartest person in any room. But the show consistently demonstrates that Suze possesses genuine intelligence that operates in domains most people don't think to measure. Suze's mechanical aptitude is the most visible form of his intelligence, even though the show often presents it casually. He maintains the Mystery Shack, a building that regularly gets damaged by supernatural incidents, dimensional anomalies, gnome invasions, robot attacks, and the general chaos of housing a Pines family summer. The shack has been through more structural trauma than most buildings experience in their entire existence, and Suze keeps it standing and functional through practical engineering skills developed over years of hands-on work. He fixes plumbing, electrical systems, structural damage, the building's heating and cooling, and whatever custom modifications Stan has installed over the decades. He understands how the shack's interconnected systems work, and can diagnose problems through observation and intuition that would require formal diagnostic equipment for trained professionals. When the Mystery Shack is converted into the Shacktron mech during Weirdmageddon, it's possible in part because Suze has maintained and understood the building systems for years. He knows every pipe, wire, support beam, and secret passage in the structure. His intimate knowledge of the shack's infrastructure provides the foundation that allows McGucket's engineering genius to transform it into a fighting machine on short notice. Without Suze's years of maintenance work and his deep understanding of how the building functions, the Shacktron couldn't have been built as quickly or as effectively as the crisis demanded. Suze also demonstrates emotional intelligence that the show presents as a form of genuine wisdom rather than simple naivety. He's loyal to the Pines family in a way that goes far beyond employment obligation. He understands Stan's loneliness and the gruff exterior Stan uses to hide his emotional vulnerability, and he provides companionship and support without forcing Stan to acknowledge his feelings directly. He senses when Dipper and Mabel need guidance and delivers it through casual, seemingly offhand observations that somehow cut directly to the heart of whatever they're struggling with. He sees through pretense to the emotional truth underneath, and he responds to that truth with kindness and sincerity that never feels forced or calculated. In the episode Blendon's Game, Suze's emotional intelligence is tested when he has to confront his relationship with his absent father. The episode reveals that Suze's father left the family when Suze was young and has sent only a series of postcards with hollow promises to visit, never following through. Suze could be bitter about this. He could let it define him, turning him angry or withdrawn the way parental abandonment affects so many people. Instead, Suze has processed this pain in a way that allowed him to remain open, trusting, and emotionally generous. He found father figures in Stan and others. He built a sense of family around the Mystery Shack that isn't dependent on the biological family that abandoned him. This emotional resilience shows intelligence about how to process trauma, how to build meaning from painful circumstances, and how to create the life you need rather than being trapped by the life you were given. The episode Seuss and the Real Girl shows another dimension of Seuss's intelligence through his understanding of authenticity in relationships. When Seuss tries to find a girlfriend through a dating simulator video game, the game's AI becomes obsessed with him and tries to trap him in the digital world. Seuss has to distinguish between the artificial perfection of the game's simulated relationship, where everything is easy and pleasant, and the uncertain, scary, but real possibility of genuine human connection. He chooses reality over simulation, demonstrating the same fundamental wisdom that Mabel demonstrates when she chooses to leave Bill's bubble. Seuss understands intuitively that authentic relationships, even when they're scary and uncertain and imperfect, are worth more than perfect but artificial ones. When Seuss becomes the manager of the Mystery Shack at the end of the series, the show frames this transition as meaningful and earned rather than comic or incidental. Seuss has spent years proving himself through reliable service, genuine understanding of how the business functions, deep knowledge of the building and its endless quirks, and the interpersonal intelligence that makes him trusted and liked by everyone he encounters. His promotion isn't just a reward for loyalty, it's recognition that Seuss possesses every form of intelligence necessary to run the operation successfully. Intelligence about people, about maintenance, about business operations, and about creating an environment where visitors and employees alike feel welcome and valued. His intelligence isn't academic, but it's real, it's practical, and it's been demonstrated consistently throughout every challenge the series threw at him. The broader supporting cast of Gravity Falls also demonstrates various forms of intelligence that deserve acknowledgement, even briefly. Pacifica Northwest shows intelligence in how she eventually breaks free from her family's toxic influence. The Northwest family has spent generations building their identity around wealth, status, and the lie that their ancestor founded Gravity Falls. Pacifica was raised to believe that her family's money and social position made them superior to everyone else. Breaking free from that conditioning requires genuine intellectual and moral courage. Pacifica has to recognize that the values she was taught are wrong, that her family's wealth was built on exploitation and deception, and that being a good person requires rejecting the worldview she grew up in. This kind of self-examination and willingness to change fundamental beliefs about yourself and your place in the world is a form of intelligence that most people never achieve, regardless of their IQ or academic credentials. Robbie Valentino shows creative intelligence through his music and art, even though his personal maturity often lags far behind his artistic ability. His capacity for creative expression is real, even when it's channeled through teenage angst and relationship drama. Even Waddles, Mabel's beloved pig, contributes to the show's exploration of intelligence in the episode where Ford's intellect-boosting device temporarily makes Waddles a genius, voiced by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Enhanced Waddles solves complex equations and contemplates the nature of existence, but ultimately chooses to return to his normal pig intelligence because he recognizes that the simple pleasures of being a pig make him happier than the burden of genius ever could. This choice, made by a temporarily super intelligent pig, mirrors the show's broader argument. Intelligence that comes at the cost of happiness, connection, and the ability to simply enjoy being alive isn't the gift people assume it is. Sometimes wisdom means knowing that you don't need to be the smartest person in the room to have a good life. The show's treatment of intelligence across its entire cast, from cosmic demons to 12-year-old twins to a beloved pet pig, builds toward a single philosophical argument that ties everything together. Intelligence isn't a hierarchy with one type at the top and others below it. It's an ecosystem where different capabilities serve different functions, and the healthiest systems are the ones where diverse forms of intelligence work together rather than competing for dominance. The Pines family doesn't defeat Bill through any single type of intelligence. They defeat him through the combination of Ford's knowledge, Stan's street smarts, Dipper's analysis, Mabel's emotional courage, McGucket's engineering, Wendy's composure, Sue's loyalty, and the contributions of everyone in Gravity Falls who fights back against chaos. Each person brings what they're best at, and together they're stronger than any one form of intelligence, no matter how vast, could be alone. Gravity Falls presents intelligence not as a single measurable quality, but as a spectrum of capabilities, each valuable in its own context, and each limited in specific ways. The show spent 2 seasons and a graphic novel exploring what it means to be smart, and the answer it arrived at is more nuanced and more hopeful than most stories about genius ever achieve. Bill Cipher represents intelligence at its most vast and its most disconnected. Over 1 trillion years of accumulated knowledge, cosmic power that can warp reality itself. Manipulative ability refined across centuries of contact with the brightest minds in human history. And none of it was enough to understand why one family would fight for each other against impossible odds. Bill could manipulate anyone. He could see through any deception. He could solve any equation. But he couldn't comprehend love, and that blind spot cost him everything. Bill's intelligence teaches us that knowledge without connection is incomplete, that power without purpose is empty, and that the smartest being in the universe can still be the most fundamentally ignorant. Stanford Pines represents academic genius with its extraordinary capabilities and its dangerous blind spots. A mind brilliant enough to build a portal between dimensions, map the supernatural phenomena of an entire region, and survive 30 years of interdimensional exile. But too proud to see through a triangle's flattery, too isolated to listen when a friend begged him to stop, too attached to his own brilliance to recognize when it was being used against him. Ford's intelligence teaches us that genius without humility is a weapon that wounds its wielder first. Stanley Pines represents practical and emotional intelligence. A man without formal education who taught himself dimensional engineering, maintained a 30-year deception, built a successful business from nothing, and ultimately outwitted a cosmic demon through the one skill that no amount of supernatural power could replicate: the ability to read people, to love people, and to sacrifice everything for the people who matter. Stan's intelligence teaches us that the most important knowledge isn't found in books or laboratories. It's found in the connections we build and the lengths we'll go to protect them. Fiddleford McGucket represents the vulnerability of genius and the price of knowledge. A mind brilliant enough to build computers before the industry existed, design neurotechnology that could selectively erase memories, and construct massive robots from junkyard scraps, but too sensitive to bear the weight of what it saw, and too brilliant at solving problems for its own good. McGucket's intelligence teaches us that knowledge can wound, that the attempt to escape from truth can cost you everything, and that recovery requires not just capability but forgiveness, both of others and of yourself. Dipper Pines represents curiosity as intelligence, a young mind that never stops asking questions, that approaches the world with analytical rigor and genuine wonder simultaneously, and that grows stronger through every question it asks and every mistake it makes. Dipper's intelligence teaches us that the most important intellectual quality isn't knowledge. It's the willingness to seek knowledge, to question assumptions, and to change your mind when the evidence demands it. Mabel Pines represents creative and emotional genius. A heart smart enough to read people's deepest feelings, brave enough to choose reality over comfortable fantasy, and imaginative enough to find solutions where logic alone falls short. Mabel's intelligence teaches us that emotions aren't the opposite of intelligence. They're a different expression of it, and sometimes the most important truth isn't the one you think your way to, but the one you feel your way through. Gideon represents intelligence corrupted by obsession, a clever mind that could have been remarkable if it had been directed toward anything beyond its own desires. His intelligence teaches us that capability without character produces manipulation rather than meaning. Wendy and Seuss represent the intelligence that holds everything together, the steady, practical, emotionally grounded forms of capability that don't announce themselves with grand achievements, but without which nothing else could function. Their intelligence teaches us that reliability, loyalty, and the ability to stay calm when everything is falling apart are cognitive achievements as real and as valuable as any scientific breakthrough. The show's final argument about intelligence comes in its final moments. Bill Cipher, the most powerful and knowledgeable being in the series, is defeated not by a greater intellect, but by a family that works together, combining every form of intelligence they possess into something greater than any one mind could achieve alone. Ford provides the plan and the technology. Stan provides the sacrifice and the con. Dipper and Mabel provide the courage and the emotional core. McGucket provides the engineering. Wendy and Seuss and the whole town provide the support and the fight. The Zodiac Wheel, the ancient prophecy that could have defeated Bill, requires 10 specific people to join hands in a circle. 10 different symbols, each representing a different person with different qualities and different forms of intelligence. The wheel only works when all 10 are united. This isn't just a plot device. It's a metaphor for the show's entire philosophy about intelligence. No single symbol is sufficient. No single person's capabilities can defeat the threat alone. The solution requires diversity of intelligence, cooperation across differences, and the willingness to work together even when personal conflicts make it difficult. The fact that the Zodiac Wheel fails because Stan and Ford can't stop arguing long enough to join hands is itself a statement about intelligence. Two of the smartest people in the show, each brilliant in their own way, can't overcome their emotional conflict long enough to save the world. Their intelligence, impressive as it is individually, becomes a liability when it can't be combined with the intelligence of others. Bill exploits this failure immediately, proving that divided intelligence is vulnerable intelligence no matter how brilliant its individual components are. The solution that actually works, Stan's sacrifice, succeeds precisely because it combines multiple forms of intelligence in a single act. Stan's con artistry fools Bill. Stan's emotional intelligence gives him the courage to sacrifice himself. Ford's technical knowledge operates the memory gun. The family's collective emotional bond provides the foundation that eventually restores Stan's memories. Every type of intelligence in the show contributes to the final victory, and no single type could have achieved it alone. Gravity Falls ends with the Pines twins leaving the town at the end of summer, returning to a normal life that will never feel entirely normal again. Dipper and Mabel have grown in ways that reflect the show's full spectrum of intelligence. Dipper has learned that being smart isn't just about having answers. It's about knowing when to stop looking for answers and start trusting the people around you. Mabel has learned that emotional intelligence includes the courage to face change and loss rather than running from them. Stan has learned that his intelligence was always valuable, even when the world told him it wasn't. Ford has learned that genius needs humility and connection to be complete. The smartest character in Gravity Falls isn't any single person. It's the Pines family and everyone who stands with them, working as one. The show's answer to the question of what intelligence really means is that it means more together than it could ever mean alone. No genius is complete by itself. No form of intelligence is sufficient on its own. The deepest wisdom is knowing that you need other people, that their strengths complement your weaknesses, and that the intelligence of a community, a family, a team working together is always greater than the sum of its parts. Bill Cipher spent 1 trillion years accumulating knowledge, power, and understanding across infinite dimensions. And in the end, he was defeated by a family from Glass Shard Beach, New Jersey. A researcher who learned too late that pride is a weakness. A con man who always knew that love is a strength. An engineer who chose forgiveness over resentment. A 12-year-old boy who never stopped asking questions. A 12-year-old girl who never stopped believing in people. A teenager who never lost her composure. A handyman who never stopped being kind. Together, they were smarter than a god. And that might be the most important thing Gravity Falls ever taught us about being smart. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.